There is an old saying attributed to centuries of wisdom that goes like this: hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. The West today is in crisis. We're living in hard times. The proof is everywhere you look, from endless bombing attacks in Sweden to rape and grooming gangs in Britain, to state-sponsored death in Canada, to mass migration into the United States. All of these issues have one common denominator: weak men. The West is in decline because we're ruled by effeminate, spineless, pandering cowards who care more about pronouns than protecting their own citizens, more about minority grievances than majority survival, and more about their own virtue signaling than the future of their nations. Now let's explore this further. Next, the ontology of masculinity. Before we talk about the specific failures, we need to understand what masculinity actually is and why it matters. Masculinity is not toxic. It is not a social construct. It is a distinct mode of being, rooted in biology and expressed across every human culture. At its core, masculinity is oriented towards protection, provision, and order. The masculine instinct is to identify threats, confront them, and neutralize them, to build walls, to enforce boundaries, and to defend the vulnerable, to lead, to take responsibility, and to bear the consequences of hard decisions. Femininity, by contrast, is oriented towards nurturing, relationship, and consensus. The feminine instinct is to care for the wounded, to seek harmony, to avoid conflict, and to prioritize feelings over facts. These are not weaknesses. In their proper place, they are strengths. A society needs both. But when femininity rules, when the masculine virtues of strength, assertiveness, and boundary setting are suppressed or mocked, the society becomes soft, vulnerable, and prey to those who respect nothing but power. The Bible captures this perfectly in the story of the fall. Where was Adam when the serpent tempted Eve? Standing right next to her. The Bible says she gave the fruit to her husband, who was with her. He watched, he said nothing, he did not protect his wife from the lie, he did not correct her error, he passively went along, and then he ate. And this was one of the very first errors of man, passivity. It was the abdication of masculine responsibility. And weak men have been destroying civilizations ever since. Let's look at a few examples to illustrate. Let's start with an American example in Minnesota. Take Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. As we documented in a previous video, over $9 billion in taxpayer funds were stolen through coordinated fraud schemes operated primarily by the Somali community in Minneapolis. We're talking about industrial scale of looting of the public treasury that has gone on for years while the people who run the state did nothing. And when the fraud was exposed, what did Governor Tim Walz do? Did he express outrage at the criminals who stole from hardworking Minnesotans? Did he promise to clean house, prosecute the guilty, and deport the non-citizens who betray their host country? Of course not. He attacked the federal prosecutors who uncovered the fraud. He accused the Trump administration of politicizing the issue. And when the Somali community faced criticism, justified criticism based on the overwhelming demographic reality of the perpetrators, Tim Walz and Jacob Frey rushed to their defense. They called the backlash racist. They framed the fraud as an attack on immigrants rather than a crime perpetrated by immigrants. They stood with the criminals against the victims. Think about that for a second. A governor whose primary duty is to protect the citizens of his state saw those citizens robbed of billions of dollars, and instead of standing up for them, he stood up for the people who robbed them. Why? Because he's weak. He fears being called racist more than he fears the collapse of his state. He cares more about the approval of a tiny ethnic enclave than about the welfare of the millions he was elected to serve. That is effeminate leadership. That is the abdication of masculine responsibility. Now, let's cross the Atlantic to the United Kingdom, specifically to Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister. For years, a horrific scandal was unfolding in towns across northern England, wherein gangs of men, overwhelmingly of Pakistani heritage, were systematically raping young white British girls. Thousands of victims, decades of abuse, social workers who failed to protect children because they feared offending minority communities. Even worse, the police, which was supposed to protect those children, not only looked the other way, they actively helped cover up the scandal for fear of being called bigots and racist. And when concerned citizens finally exposed the truth, what did the British establishment do? They smeared them as far right. They smeared anyone who pointed out the ethnic and religious patterns of the perpetrators as Islamophobic bigots. They shut down investigations to bury the reports they protected the rapists and silenced the victims. And Keir Starmer, the man who now leads the country, was at the heart of the cover-up. And as the director of public prosecutions during much of the period, he oversaw a system that refused to prosecute these crimes effectively. And when he became prime minister, he continued the same pattern, dismissing concerns about grooming gangs as right-wing talking points. This is what weak men do. They cannot confront the enemy, so they pretend the enemy doesn't exist. They cannot protect the vulnerable, so they blame the vulnerable for noticing the danger. They cannot fulfill the most basic duty of any government, to keep its citizens safe, so they compensate by pandering to supposed victim groups to signal their virtue. A strong man, on the other hand, would have acknowledged the problem, prosecuted the criminals, deported the non-citizens, and protected the girls. Starmer did none of that, because Starmer is weak. He's effeminate, a man who would rather be liked by the people than do the right thing. Next, let's go to Spain. Pedro Sanchez, the socialist prime minister, has overseen a dramatic transformation of his country. He has opened the borders to hundreds of thousands of migrants from Africa and the Middle East, despite Spain's already crippling unemployment, housing crisis, and rising crime. Recently, Spain approved over 500,000 new migrants. The country's demographics are rapidly shifting. Violent crime is up, terror attacks are more frequent, and when the Spanish citizens protest, when they express legitimate concerns about their safety, their culture, and their future, Sanchez calls them xenophobes and far right. He is not leading, he is committing national suicide, one signature at a time. A strong leader would say, Spain is for the Spanish. Our culture is worth preserving, our safety is paramount. We will accept a limited number of immigrants who assimilate, contribute, and respect our laws, but we will not open the floodgates to millions of people. Sanchez says none of that, because Sanchez is weak. He is afraid of being called a bigot. He is more concerned with the approval of Brussels, bureaucrats, and globalist NGOs than with the welfare of his own people. He is a man without a spine, leading a nation toward extinction. Next, let's turn our attention to Canada. We covered Canada's assisted suicide program in depth, this horrific program where thousands of Canadians have been killed. But let's revisit this program through the lens of weak men. Justin Trudeau, the self-proclaimed former feminist prime minister, has presided over a country where 5% of all deaths now are doctor-assisted, where a 26-year-old diabetic with depression was euthanized because the state failed to provide him with proper mental health care, where death has effectively become the default solution for suffering. A strong man would look at this monstrous system and say, no, this is monstrous, okay? We will not kill our citizens, we will care for them. We will create a society where people want to live, not a system that helps them die. Trudeau did the exact opposite. He expanded this assisted suicide program. He celebrated it as compassionate choice. He offered needles instead of hope. Because Trudeau is not a strong man. He is a preening, empty-suited dilettante who cares more about his Instagram feed than about the souls of his people. He wears blackface, he lectures others about privilege, and while he performs his little theater of virtue, Canadians are being put down like stray dogs. That is weak men for you, guys. That is hard times. Now, the common thread. What unites all of these leaders? What explains why Tim Walz defends Somali fraudsters, Keir Starmer protects Pakistani rape gangs, and Pedro Sanchez opens Spain's borders, and Justin Trudeau euthanizes his own citizens? It is the fear of one word: racist. These men are absolutely terrified of being called racist. They would rather see their nations collapse, their children raped, their treasuries looted, and their citizens killed than risk a single headline accusing them of bigotry. Their entire moral framework has been captured by an ideology that places racial and ethnic sensitivity above every other value, including justice, safety, and life itself. This is the feminization of leadership. Traditional masculinity is willing to be hated. It is willing to be called names. It understands that doing the right thing often means making enemies. But these weak men crave approval. They need to be liked. They cannot stand the thought of being excluded from polite society. So they grovel, they pander, they betray their own people, and they call it compassion. Now, what would strong men actually do? For starters, a strong leader would secure the border. Not with press conferences and task forces, but with walls, troops, and rapid deportation. He would say, if you come here illegally, you would not stay. If you commit a crime, you would be removed. This is our country, and we decide who enters. A strong leader would enforce the law equally. When billions were stolen by one ethnic group, he would prosecute every single criminal and then ask why that group was allowed in to begin with. He would not defend the criminals, he would defend the taxpayers. A strong leader would name the enemy. When gangs of Pakistani men rape British girls, he would call them what they are, rapists. He would prioritize the victims over the sensibilities of the perpetrators. He would deport every non-citizen involved and lock up the rest. A strong leader would refuse to kill the citizens. He would look at a depressed 26-year-old and say, "You matter. Your life has meaning. We will find you help. Okay? We will not give you poison." A strong leader would put his own people first, not because he hates outsiders, but because his first duty is to those who elected him. He would understand that a nation that does not prioritize its own citizens will soon have no citizens to prioritize. These are not radical ideas. They are basic responsibilities of governance. They have been understood by every civilization that survived more than a few generations. And the fact that they now seem radical, the fact that saying protect your own people is considered far-right and controversial, is proof of how far we've fallen. We must conclude. The West is an absolute mess today because the men who lead it are not men. They're effeminate, spineless, approval-seeking cowards who have forgotten the first duty of leadership, protection. And they've abandoned their citizens to fraudsters, to rapists, and death. They've opened borders they cannot control. They've silenced those who speak the truth. They have called their own cowardice compassion. But here's the good news. Weak men create hard times, and hard times create strong men. The pendulum is already swinging. Across the West, ordinary people are waking up. They're rejecting the weak men who betray them. They're demanding leaders with spines. The question is not whether strong men will rise again. They always do. The question is whether they will rise in time, before the hard times become too hard, before the damage is irreversible, and before the West follows every other civilization that was destroyed from within by weak and effeminate leaders. Adam stood by and watched while his wife disobeyed. The world has been paying for his passivity ever since. We cannot afford to repeat that mistake. We must be strong, be vigilant, and demand the same from those who claim to lead us. Thank you for listening and watching, and God bless you. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.